welcome back to the channel. So today's video would be focused on how we can do performance testing using Test Manager. So this is what the performance testing setup looks like. So this is Test Manager, and over here you can see I've created a scenario and in which I've executed like some executions. If I go into the results, go into the executions, then this is what the result of that performance testing looks like. Now let's get started with the video to see how we can actually achieve this. First and foremost, there are a few settings that you need to do because now I am running all these things on a serverless robot. So the setting that you have to do over here is that you have to, of course, have a robot account here. So if you go here in the robot account, you would see that I already have a robot account set up. Now, when you are doing an unattended setup, you have an option to go with serverless robot. And when you select this, then you don't have to give a domain or a username or even the credentials. And then you need to have a machine created over here. And then the machine also has to be serverless. So if you go to tenants, you go to machines. And from here, if you select add machine, you have to always go with cloud robot serverless, which means you're having an account and you're associating it with a machine that's also serverless. Once you have done that, that's all the setup that you need to do in the orchestrator, that you have it ready so that when you do a test case execution from Test Manager, it actually runs on a serverless machine. Now, the other thing that you need to always keep in mind whenever you're using certain test cases as part of your performance testing scenario, and you're creating those test cases in Studio, they always have to be created as cross-platform, right? If you're creating it on Windows or Windows Legacy, then it's not supported and you'll have to create all the test cases all over again. Apart from that, there are also certain other limitations in terms of what all activities you can use, what all are supported in cross-platform. So it's not, I would say that it's not a limitation of the performance testing scenario, but rather a limitation of when you're using a cross-platform project. Only cross-platform project are supported. So whenever you're creating a new particular test case or a process, say for example, if I go and I select test automation framework from here, if it's Windows, then you won't be able to actually use this as part of your performance testing scenario. Now, how does this helps, right? Us executing performance testing scenario, because any functional test cases that you're also creating can also be part of your performance testing scenario. So I created two very simple test cases. One is a get API test case and the other is a post API test case. And we are going to run them, do a performance test on both the APIs. So it's actually doing a performance testing of both my APIs. Now, if I come back to here, which is the test manager, there are certain limitations in terms of the performance testing capabilities here as well, provided by UiPath, but there are certain limitations on what you can do and what you cannot do using this particular thing. First of all, this particular, I'd say, instance, if it is in Canada, then performance scenarios currently are not supported. So whenever you're creating a tenant or whenever you're creating an instance or an environment, it has to be in US, EU, and I think Japan is also supported, but you can check that out. Not in all locations you would be able to access this particular feature, I'd say, right? So I have two tenants. If I go to the Canada one, then I won't be able to access, but if I'm in the US one, I'd be able to access. So make sure you're selecting the region in which it is accessible. Now, once you have done that and you have certain test cases, now I can have tens of test cases here and I would pick up 5 to be part of my performance testing scenario. So all I need to do is that I will click here, create scenario. I'll name it something like test. Then here are some advanced options. I can select what type of testing I want to do, load, spike, stress, endurance. Let's go with load. I have to select the application type. For me, it's API service, so I'll select API service. Responsiveness, let's say I want fast or instant, right? And then I click on create. Once I click on create, this is what it's going to look like because I have not configured any load group yet. Okay, so now what are load group basically? So you are kind of specifying the number of concurrent users assigned to that particular test case when you're creating a load group. So you can actually create load group for like different test cases, and then you assign. So for example, if I go to add load group, I can select the folder and I can select which particular test case I want to use for this particular load group, right? So I have two test cases. Say suppose I go with get API. So I'm going to create a load group of one of my test case, which is called get API. And then I can also select the robot type. For me, it's cloud robot serverless, but if you're using on-premise robot, you can select that as well. And the package version from here, and I click on select. Once I do that, and if I click on this, I would have certain settings over here, which is like virtual users. First is virtual users. That would specify the number of concurrent simulated user assigned to this particular test case. Now, each group, each load group that I am creating can only support up to 500 virtual users. That's again one of the limitations. You can't go above 500 virtual users with a total of 2000 across a scenario. Okay. Now, then there are thresholds. We have maximum response time or average error rate threshold. Okay. And for maximum response time threshold, the upper limit, it actually indicates the upper limit in milliseconds that responses should not exceed. If they do exceed, then that would be marked as a failed test case. Okay. And then you have data source. In case your particular test case is accessing a data set which contains test data, then you can connect to data fabric from here. Okay, so if I go to next, if I have a data fabric configured, then I'll be able to select. In my case, that's not the case. So I'm going to just go ahead and ignore that for now. Similarly, I can create multiple load group. Now the question would be, why would I create multiple load groups? So if you think of a real world system, application traffic rarely comes from a single type of user, right? It can not follow a uniform pattern. It's always different automation types or, simulating realistic traffic patterns to detect interaction effect. So you would create load group of, API test cases, web UI test cases, or desktop test cases together to reflect the diversity of how users would actually interact with the system in real time, right? So you can have different load groups doing different type of test on your system at the same time. So that's why multiple load group would be helpful. Now, once you have created all this, this is what your test case is going to look like. So if I just look at this, I've only created one load group for this demo. Okay. Now, the other thing that you always should do is that you should perform a dry run of the load group created. Now, once I do that, what is going to happen over here, you would start seeing a status bar, I'd say over here. Okay. See these things. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4, I'd say, status to it. First would be loading test configuration. This is going to validate the scenario setup and load the configuration details, which is your test cases and all of those things, right? The second would be, it would start provisioning the resources. So currently it is checking the resources availability, then it would start provisioning them. So the required execution resources are allocated for cloud runs, which means provisioning serverless robot and consuming platform units. Whenever you're running, your platform units are getting consumed. Then it would start preparing the virtual users. And then at last, the fourth stage would be, it would actually perform the performance test according to the configured load profile, whatever you've given as the ramp up time, peak or ramp down time. So it is going to do that. Why is it necessary to do the dry run? Because the dry run would also give you an estimate of how much platform unit is going to be used. So it's always advisable that you do a dry run before actually doing a full execution of your performance testing scenario. And that's going to give you a better insight on what would happen when you actually run everything all together, right? Now, meanwhile it is running, dry run in progress, I'm going to just go ahead and take you to the one that I executed a few hours ago. So I did a dry run and then I also did a full executions. Okay. Now it shows that current virtual user in active load group plus the machines. And I've created 2 load groups here. Both have 20 virtual user. Group 1 is the get API. Group 2 is the post API. Okay. and the maximum response time is 300 milliseconds in both, okay? Now, if I go to results and I go into the two execution that was done. So one was done in 4 minutes, 39 seconds, which was the dry run. Full execution was done in 13 minutes and 23 seconds. So if I go inside that, there would be a lot of charts giving us a lot of information, okay? So for me, the group 1 failed and group 2 was passed, okay? There are no automation errors as such. There are no HTTP errors as well. Now this thing will tell me, it would show me how many virtual users were active at a given time. And this reflects the configured ramp up, peak and ramp down phases that we have done, right? So you can see at this time it was 20 and then it went down to 0. Then this would tell me HTTP response time. Okay. It tracks the average response time of my request over the selected period. This would give me the error percentage. This would give me the automation step duration, automation error. This would be the throughput request, then infrastructure related information you'll get here. And if there are any automation error or web traffic, then you would get that information over here. Now we can also compare both the groups. So if I put compare, I can actually select the two groups that I want to compare. And now if you see two different color of lines, right? So if you see this particular pink, I'd say the darker pink represents the group 1 and the lighter pink represents the group 2. And that's how you can see when you're comparing both the groups together, right? Now, if I go back to the one that I executed, which is called test. So the dry run is now completed, right? If I go into results, I can actually have a look at the dry run. Okay, it's still running. Dry run is in progress. So the dry run is completed now, and you can see your response time has reached 380 milliseconds with the limit of 100 milliseconds. And that's why this particular scenario failed. Because when we did configure this particular load group, we set a maximum response time of 100, which was exceeded, and that's why this was marked as failed. So in this particular way, you can utilize your existing test suite or your existing test cases to be part of your performance testing scenario and do performance testing using the same particular tool, which is Test Manager. That's it for this particular video. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions related to the video, please feel free to drop it in the comment section below. And I shall see you in the next video soon. Thanks for watching.